Aloha, guys. This is Tiggy Maximus with Tiggy Maximus Talks, episode 247 on Spotify and YouTube. On this episode, I'm going to talk about the Chargers, their big statement victory against a very tough defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. The game took place SoFi Stadium. I watched it on the ESPN app. Gotta say, it was one of the most roller coaster vibe type of a game where your feelings are at an all-time high, self-doubt, then you got low points. But overall, it was like also kind of a stalemate too, because both teams seemed to be trading like a lot of field goals, and the game went into overtime. So I believe it started with like Chargers got a touchdown early on. I believe Omari Hampton returned from injury. I think he had a fractured ankle in week 5. So he came back in week 15, was it? Or week 14. Yeah, week 14. Came back week 14. So, with 9 weeks off, trying to rehab, try to run through tackles. It's a long process to rehab. So I'm glad, the Chargers have both Kimani Vidal and Omari Hampton. 1-2 punch in the run game. And the fact that Justin Herbert, with just one hand, he was actually the leading rusher. So when you have that, 2 good running backs and a quarterback that will run if he has to, that makes you, keep you kind of honest. You never know if he's going to throw. You never know he's going to run with the ball or hand it off to somebody. So, but I have to admit, the passing game has been, it's kind of hard to watch sometimes, because sometimes you want those passes to do well, get to the receivers, running backs, whatever, and then get the ball moving. But I kind of expected Justin Herbert to have some problems trying to even handle the ball and then try to even pass the ball to receivers. And he had, some open guys, but he couldn't hit them sometimes. But when he does find open guys and he does hit them, it makes for some good football, because, sometimes you're leaning towards a certain pattern of, making bad passes. Wish you could take some of those back, but sometimes you do hit those spots, and such a big relief, especially on 3rd and 10. Anytime you have 3rd and 10, you've already had like 2 plays where you try to pass, but it didn't work. And the third time, sometimes it does work. So, but with that being the case, Marion Hampton got the first touchdown, and then I believe the Eagles came back and got a field goal, so it was like 7-3. Then the Chargers ended up going with the field goal on their own, went up 10-3, and I think at that point there was this interesting play where there was 3 turnovers in the same play. So the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, he threw an interception to one of what looked like a defensive lineman of the Chargers, and he tried to run, but then the defensive lineman of the Chargers got stripped of the ball, and the ball ended up in the hands of Jalen Hurts, and then he picked it up off of a bounce, and then I think he wanted to run, but then as he tries to run, another defensive player on the Chargers stripped Jalen Hurts of the ball, and the ball is now like going backwards, and then one of the defensive players on the Chargers ended up corralling the ball, and the Chargers got possession. But as soon as that happened, on the very next play, the Chargers, Justin Herbert, he ended up fumbling the ball on the very next play, and the Eagles got the ball back. So what could have ended up being a possession where the Chargers could have gone up 13-3 or 17-3, but unfortunately, with the Herbert fumble, it eventually led to an Eagles field goal, I believe, and it was like 10-6, and then halftime came around, and then the Chargers, I believe, probably got the ball first, but I don't remember if they scored. So there were a lot of punts from that point and a lot of field goals. So at one point, I think it went up to Chargers got a field goal. They went up 13-6, and then I think the Eagles ended up getting a field goal because it was 13-9. And then fourth quarter came around, and with a lot of punts and all these field goals being traded back and forth, well, unfortunately, the Eagles got a Saquon Barkley long rushing touchdown, and the Eagles went ahead 16-13 in the fourth quarter. So, with that being the case, yeah. 16, yeah. So it ended up being 16-13, and then the Chargers were in the red zone, and I think almost on the next play or the next possession, but unfortunately, they only got a field goal out of it. And then there was a play where I think the Eagles committed a penalty, and they extended the Chargers' possession, their drive, and so they could have had a shot at a touchdown, but I don't think they got close enough. And I think they just had like a sack, and then there's some incompletions and maybe a stuff run. So like they couldn't get anything going. So the Chargers ended up, getting the field goal, which they did the first time, but then they opted to go for a touchdown. But when they gave the Chargers another chance to try to go for a touchdown, but fourth and goal, and they were still far away from the goal line. So they were destined to get a field goal in that possession. So at that point, it was 16-16. And then I believe with just 3 minutes left, the Eagles managed to get the field goal. They got some great catches from A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, just finding those guys. And, the Eagles went ahead 19-16. So Justin Herbert, he needs to dig deep and get the ball down close enough. And, the Chargers with Justin Herbert, somehow managed to get the drive, and with like less than what might have been 8 seconds left or something, the Chargers were down close enough. And, Justin Herbert rushing, he uses legs, because sometimes his hands, with just one hand, he couldn't get enough passes, but he did get some passes though. But with a mixture of getting the occasional pass with his one hand and then the occasional rush by Justin Herbert, and then got some good running from Vidal and Hampton. They got down to 8 seconds and they got close enough for Cameron Dicker to kick the game tying field goal, make it 19-19, send it into overtime. And of course, if you have Cameron Dicker on your fantasy football team like myself, you're probably racking up a lot of points on those field goals. 4 field goals, 1 extra point off of 1 touchdown. So, yeah. So overtime. So the Eagles won the coin toss, and they elected to kick first. So Chargers got the ball. Again, Justin Herbert got some passes. He had to rush a lot. There were some scary rushes where he got annihilated, but he just got back up, protecting his left hand. But honestly, Chargers got the field goal, went ahead 22-19. By the way, the regular season overtime games are 10 minutes long, and you are guaranteed 1 possession each. So, the Eagles, they converted a lot of 3rd downs, some 4th downs, and the Eagles got down to the red zone. And so at this point, main thing is just to make sure the Eagles only get a field goal. And, the Eagles kind of had a field goal in their pocket. And with what seemed like, was it 2 minutes left in overtime? The Eagles, Jalen Hurts threw a pass. It looked like it was going to go to a receiver on the Eagles by the name of Dotson. And, it would appear that the ball got deflected, and Tony Jefferson caught the ricochet of the pass and stayed in bounds, and his teammate made sure he went down quickly and then ended the play, because that interception ended the game, and the Chargers win 22-19. And again, roller coaster of emotions. Chargers dug deep, didn't give up. They were ahead for the most part, but then they were behind and then tied it up. And then it was kind of a war of attrition, battle of the field goals and punts, and the Chargers came out on top, made a defensive play. Justin Herbert had to make some plays. The defense had to make some big plays. Cameron Dicker was solid. I was pretty happy. And the Chargers, they're 9-4, the number 5 seed in the AFC playoff bracket, and next Sunday they're going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 6-7, but it's going to be in Kansas City. So, it's going to be a tough game for the Chargers because it'll probably be close. But Justin Herbert, he can will his team, get them going. Defense will probably be there. Cameron Dick can probably kick in the cold. And the Chargers can probably do some damage. So hopefully the Chargers win. I think they're going to win. It's weird because initially I kind of thought that when the schedule came out, I thought the Chargers were going to lose the Eagles game, and I thought they were going to lose in Kansas City. But the Chargers, they look like they're going to win this game too. So I think the Chargers will do well in Kansas City and go to 10-4, and then try to chase down the Broncos, because the Broncos, I think, are playing the Green Bay Packers, who did beat the Chicago Bears. So that's going to be a fun one. I'll be keeping some close tabs, and it should be a fun matchup to watch. That's one of the good games to watch. Chiefs and Chargers, Packers and Broncos. There's also Bills and Patriots. I think there's Rams and Lions. So there's a lot of good ones. I think there's even Steelers and Dolphins too. And then, of course, I'm kind of curious about Bengals and Ravens. So, and I am looking forward to the Eagles and Raiders game because I kind of want the Raiders to lose again. They are in possession to have the number one pick. So it would behoove them in their best interest that the Raiders should lose not only that game, but the rest of their games. Keep the number one pick and draft the Indiana University quarterback. I think his name is Fernando Mendoza. He is really good because Ohio State just lost to Indiana for the Big Ten championship. I watched it, and Indiana beat Ohio State. That is so hard to do, and nobody gave Indiana a chance unless you're from Indiana. So Indiana is the number one seed in the college football playoff, and Ohio State, I think, is number 4. So, and I think Georgia and Texas A&M, I think they rounded out the top 4. So, but other than that, a lot of fun games this coming weekend, and we'll see what happens. Go Chargers. I did manage to watch UFC 323 this past weekend. We had there was a draw between Jan Blachowicz fighting against Guskov. It was a good one. Jan got knocked down, but he got pummeled. But that was in just one round. But the other 2 rounds, I think Jan won the other 2 rounds. So it kind of evened out. It was a majority draw. And I think there was a fight before that. I think it was Dawson versus Torres. And Torres in the first round just knocked out Dawson in the first round. It was very impressive. And I think there was a good fight between Macy Barber and Karine Silva. And I think Macy Barber was able to overcome Silva's ground game and managed to keep it, striking and did some damage on the feet. So Macy Barber did win by decision. And then, I believe there was a fight between Henry Cejudo and Talbot. And this was actually Henry Cejudo's retirement fight, no matter what happens. And Talbot did pretty well in this fight with Cejudo. And, you can see that Cejudo looked like he was past his prime and just couldn't keep up with Talbot. And Talbot, I think, is going to be a big problem at 135. And then I believe we had a fight between Brandon Moreno and I think his name is Tatsuro Taira. Pretty much knocked down Brandon Moreno and did some ground and pound, and it got to a point where Brandon Moreno was face down on his stomach, and you could see Taira is pretty much just wailing on Brandon Moreno. And it got to a point where there's no way that Brandon Moreno could intelligently defend himself, face down, with big strikes coming from the left or right. So a good victory for Taira. He might be back in the title scene again. at flyweight. And then an unfortunate co-main event. So the flyweight champion Pantoja, he 26 seconds into the fight, he was going for a kick against Joshua Van, and as he went for the kick, Joshua Van pushed back on Pantoja's legs, and so that causes Pantoja to fall back, and for Pantoja, he needs to break his fall. And what he did was he put his hand down on the mat straight, and so because the momentum of the being pushed back, it looked like a dislocated elbow, or it looked like a broken arm or a dislocated elbow, and Pantoja is grabbing his left arm, and in slow motion you can see that the elbow got like separated from the joint. So like you can see in slow motion that the joint and the elbow is no longer like attached to each other, and it was as if it was got separated but stayed inside the skin. So since Pantoja can no longer continue, Joshua Van is the new flyweight champion. So, but yeah, I mean, I picked Joshua Van to win the fight, but not in that fashion. I thought he was going to beat him by, probably by decision, but it was a TKO. And then the main event, you got Merab Dafashili and Peter Yan. It was a rematch. Merab won the first time around. And Merab did fight a lot. He did defend the title like a lot this year. But Peter Yan, motivated, studied the tape, provided a blueprint as to how do you beat a wrestler with striking and fighting off Merab and his takedowns. Because I think Merab only got 2 out of 29 takedowns. So that was 27 defended. That is impressive given the fact that Merab has been doing so well in grappling and taking down everybody, but unfortunately this time around it didn't work out, and Merab was forced to, strike with Peter Yan, and Peter Yan did pretty well with his significant strikes and outclassed Merab for the most part, and great victory for Peter Yan. He is your new bantamweight champion at 135 pounds. So I would imagine Merab and Peter Yan, they're probably going to write it back for the trilogy. So, and I think those are the two best guys in the division. So, but yeah, great fights. So I did go to a comedy show on November 19th at the Poway Irish Pub. Pman produced the show. He brought on headliner Rodrigo Rodriguez, and he also had Carlton Harpy. So Pman also did his stand-up. He went up first. He had some great jokes about, I think, hand jobs and masturbating and blow jobs, and I think he brought someone on stage too, someone's birthday. But P-Man, always positive, always has some great fun, told some great jokes. I would say he was a 9 out of 10 for his comedy. Colton Harpy went up next. His comedy with his crowd, Poway crowd, it was kind of a mixed reaction because there were a lot of like there were some laughs, but also, there were some, you know, silences, kind of a chilled mood. Um, he has some of his normal jokes, but it didn't really catch on with most of the crowd. So Colton Harpy, I want to say he was 8 out of 10. Then your headliner, Rodrigo Rodriguez. First time seeing him. I guess he travels a lot for his shows. And man, he was super funny. And he was pretty funny throughout the most of his set. The crowd loved him a lot. There wasn't like a time when, you know, there wasn't a lot of silences. So I want to say, guy did pretty good. And I'm glad I got to see him. So Rodrigo Rodriguez, he was a 9.2 out of 10.